Okay, it's no secret that I've wanted a game on the Spanish Armada for quite some time, and the only serious simulation we've had on that was the old title done by S&T in 1978, Armada, the War with Spain. Now, I've already done a video on that game, and I found it, well, lacking, we'll say. So, when Turning Point Simulations in 2016 came up with their Invincible Armada 1588, designed by Mark McGlaughlin, I had to give it a try. And that's the game we're going to be looking at this morning. Now, my usual procedure is to just show you the board, the counters, tell you a little bit about the game. But in this case, I think we're better served by doing a bit of a playthrough. So that's what I'm going to do here. Now, I won't start the playthrough on turn 1 for reasons that are difficult to explain, because turn 1 sort of begins in the middle of the sequence. So we'll take the action up on turn 2 or 3, and I think by following that you'll get a much better idea of how this game works and operates. And it's a great little game, by the way, just great. Okay, before we start the video, we'll introduce some of the pieces first, so you'll be able to understand what's going on. The board is 17 inches by 11. It's a small board, but it is mounted, nicely done, and it's divided into two sections. The top section is what we'll call the strategic board. This shows you the track of the Armada. The Armada is here, and it's kind of neat because the track itself is sort of the turn record. The Armada starts here on turn 1, and each turn it will progress one box to the east, virtually acting as the turn record. And each box is named, and these are the English ports from which the English sailors will sail. So on the strategic board, there will only be the Armada itself, this one counter, and that represents what's on the tactical board. This is the formation that I've chosen for the Armada, which is the historical one. Now, the tricky part about the tactical and the strategic map is the fact that the strategic map is in a north-south orientation, while the tactical map, the top here is the west, and this is your wind direction marker, which will change in the game. So that's the only little tricky part you have to be aware of. So with the wind coming from the west here on the strategic map, here, when you go to the tactical map, you put it here, because the top is west. Now, the English have 5 squadrons. You get 2 sets. One set of markers goes on the tactical map when you fight out the tactical battle, and the 5 strategic markers stay on the strategic map. Over here to your left is the card for the Spanish squadrons. There's 3, 5, 6, 7, 8, and there's 10 squadrons. Each squadron has its own little section here, represented by a counter on the tactical board. Over here is your card describing all the event chits you get, which I've put in a little wee opaque container here. And over here is where I've put the hit markers and shot expenditure. Over on the right, you've got the equivalent card for the English and the turn sequence, which is a little bit awkward being turned sideways for the video here. And of course, this wouldn't be the setup for a 2-player game. I've set it up as if almost it's a solitaire game. And then I made a copy of the turn sequence. Just Xeroxed it off of here so we can orient it the same way. And over here is the tactical matrix card and combat charts. So the game is kind of self-contained, doesn't take a lot of space on your table, and is quite well done. I might point out that the game is quite suitable for solitaire. So let's pick up the action in the playthrough, and we'll see how this fascinating game works. Okay, that's the setup. Henry Seymour's squadron is here in the Narrows, and the squadrons of Francis Drake, John Hawkins, Charles Howard, and Martin Frobisher are in Plymouth. The Armada begins here on turn 1 at the Lizard, and the wind is from the west. Remember that the orientation of the strategic and the tactical map are different. So we'll begin the action after the Armada has moved to the east, and Francis Drake and the rest of the Seahawks have moved out into off of Plymouth, or the Eddystone Light, and entered the square of the Armada. That's when things begin to happen. So we'll begin the action there. Now, just to show you what would happen on turn 1, and why we're going to begin the playthrough a little bit after, is this. Armada would move to Eddystone Light, box 2. The Seahawks here would be able to move to off Plymouth. That's all they could do, because they cannot go directly against the wind. That's why I'll begin the video really on turn 2 of the game. So let's proceed from there. So on turn 2, the Armada would move into the off Plymouth box, and according to the rules, the Seahawks would not be able to move because they are underneath the Armada squadron. And there we can begin the game, which will then go to the tactical phase. So this one square off Plymouth is really representing the situation here. And the Spanish player is not bound to this particular formation. I just chose it because it's the historical formation which is shown in the booklet. But you don't have to take this formation. So we'll bring on the English squadrons and see how the game plays. Okay, now the rules state that any English squadron entering from the north, in this case from Plymouth, will be placed on the tactical map on the board edges from the north. So that's what I'll do now. So we'll place Francis Drake here, we'll say, Charles Howard, Martin Frobisher, John Hawkins here, all coming from the north. Now the Henry Seymour squadron, by the way, remains immobile on the strategic map until the Spanish enter Gravelines for the final invasion. But that's the way the setup is for the tactical battle. 4 squadrons coming from the north, the Armada heading east. Let's see what happens next. Now the English squadrons move first on the tactical map, and they really have 3 choices. They can move, they can attempt to repair, rally, or resupply, or they can take no action. Of course, for the purposes of the video, we're going to have them move. And they cannot move directly into the wind. Therefore, for example, Francis Drake cannot move directly against the wind because the wind is coming from the west. You can't move directly into the wind. When you move diagonally, you can go 1 square, then you must stop. But if you move across the grain here, they call orthogonally, they can move 2. So we'll have Francis Drake go like so. We'll have Charles Howard go here. We'll have Martin Frobisher go here. They're allowed to go 2, by the way, if they go in an orthogonal direction. And John Hawkins will also go 2. And you're on to the next phase. Now after you move the squadrons, you're supposed to mark them with the little moved markers here. Now technically speaking, you're supposed to move each squadron and have combat one at a time. But for the purposes of the video, I'll just move them. But this is really what should happen. These guys would not move. Let's say, for example, Drake would move and he'd have combat. But for the purposes of the video, I'll just leave them here. And we'll do all of the combats individually. They also note that the squadron of, I think it's Alcalde, has oared vessels, and he is the only vessel that's allowed to move directly against the wind. That would be here. But it's not the Spanish turn right now, so we'll continue with the English move. So Francis Drake then will attack the squadron of Antonio Oquendo. Now attacking is done in an orthogonal direction. You can't attack diagonally. So let's do the combat steps for Francis Drake versus Antonio Oquendo's squadron. Now tactical battles begin with both players choosing a tactical chit. There's only 3 chits, yellow for Spanish, red for English. And the Spanish would either pick try to board, stand off, close in, and the English would do the same. You would then cross-hatch this result on a table, and that will cause modifiers to the battle. So I'll just shuffle these up for the purposes of the video, and we'll see how the battle goes. Okay, for our example, Antonio Oquendo picks the try to board chit, and Francis Drake picks the stand off chit, which is perfectly historical. That's generally what the English did. Let's take a look at the tactical matrix and see what effect that has on the battle. Okay, so cross-hatching the Spanish try to board with the English standoff, you get these modifiers, which says English roll 2 dice first, Spanish take hits, check morale. If you pass, roll 2 dice at -1 DRM. If fail, roll no dice. So those are the modifiers that will occur for the battle. Now each squadron on the squadron cards has their own characteristics. For example, Francis Drake has a strength of 12, and it says here -1 die roll modifier to morale and retreat rolls. Add 1 battle die if try to board selected, which Francis in this case didn't select, but these are further modifiers. Let's take a look at the Spanish squadron. Okay, Oquendo's squadron has a strength of 10, and his modifiers are +1 to repair die rolls and -1 die roll to rally rolls. So those are the modifiers. Let's see how combat's done. Okay, looking at the modifiers, the only one I see that applies in this case is the size of Francis Drake's squadron, which is a 12. So he will be adding 1. And he gets to fire first. So we'll roll the dice. It says here roll 2 dice. And he gets a 6, which causes 1 hit, and a 5, which also causes another hit. So he's inflicted 2 hits on Oquendo's squadron, and we'll mark that. Okay, so we put 2 hits on Oquendo's squadron. Okay, if you remember from the tactical matrix, Oquendo has to do a morale check, but his squadron also has a -1 when he does take a rally check. So we'll roll, it says 2 dice. It's an 8, which really is a 7, and it's no effect. So Oquendo passes his morale check. So that's the procedure you would follow for every single individual attack here down the line. Now, for the purposes of the video, I'll edit that part out. I'll do all of the battles and give you a summary of what happened on each attack. I should point out that in this case, I'm going to have Charles Howard attack Oquendo and Martin Frobisher attack Oquendo. So it is possible for a defender to be attacked multiple times, and I think Oquendo is going to be in pretty rough shape. John Hawkins will not be able to attack because you can't do diagonal attacks. So I'll show you the result after Howard and Frobisher have attacked Oquendo. I don't think this is going to turn out too well for the Spanish. Okay, the net effect of those attacks was pretty bad on Oquendo's squadron. He's got 6 hits on him, which means he's now a strength of 4, and you put a little shot marker to show that he did fire in his phase. And I made one mistake in the first attack with Sir Francis Drake. We forgot to give the Spanish their fire. So Francis Drake ended up with 2 hits on him. John Hawkins got 3 hits, and Charles Howard got 2 hits. So though Oquendo's squadron is pretty shut up, the English are beginning to take damage also. Okay, one correction there. Every time a squadron fires, it has to expend a shot chit. So because Oquendo was attacked 3 times, he's expended 3 shot. Okay, now there's an ammunition kind of resupply phase which I've rolled for each squadron, and they all passed their ammo checks. So the shot markers stay on, but they do not get a low ammo marker on. You don't want one of those on your squadron. So that's the end of the combats there by the English. Okay, just before I consider what the Spanish can do, you have to do a morale check after all the combat's done. And Charles Howard's squadron broke, getting a bad die roll, and no surprise, Antonio Oquendo's squadron broke, so they're flipped to their broken side. And now I have to consider what the Spanish can do. So the Spanish can do just like the English, they can move and then have combat. So I'll consider what they're going to do, and we'll pick up the video from there. Okay, now looking at the Spanish options, they get to move in a similar manner to the English. Although I made a mistake, the galley fleet is actually this one here, Hugo Moncada's fleet. But Antonio's Oquendo's fleet's pretty broken up. Now the British, or just the Spanish, can try to counterattack, and I think that's what they'll do. But the English do have a withdrawal option. We'll move Martin Bentedona's fleet this way, which is legal, because that's going across the wind. And we'll move Recalde's squadron up here. And I think the rest will stay put. So, with that, Bentedona's squadron can engage with John Hawkins, and Martinez Recalde's with Francis Drake. And they've also been blooded a bit, so we've got two fresh fleets. But there's a new phase that comes in here, and it's called the English Withdrawal. And that can only happen when the Spanish are attacking. So let me just read up on that and make sure we're doing it right, and then we'll follow the action, if action there be. Okay, Francis Drake is going to try to withdraw before Recalde's squadron. He rolls 2 dice. He wants to get an 8 or less. In this case, he rolled a 5. And Francis Drake also, on his chart, has a -1 to retreat roll. So he definitely is able to retreat. So he'll back up 1 space, and then that will deny combat with Recalde. John Hawkins will do the same thing with Bentedona's squadron. So John Hawkins will check the modifiers. No great modifier there. And he rolls a dice, and he gets a 6. So he will be able to withdraw. And if I've read the rules correctly, that ends the combat sequence in the battle which occurred there off of Plymouth. Okay, after the tactical phase comes what the designer calls the Disengage and Reorganize phase. And in this phase, any English squadron that is in the white area must back off into the blue area, which Martin Frobisher does. The rest of them are in the blue. And the Spanish player has a slightly different procedure. Now for the Spanish player, had he any vessels in the blue area, they have to fall back into the white area, more or less reforming the Armada. So with that, that's the end of the Disengage and Reorganize phase. Okay, next comes the Reinforcement phase, which is virtually just for the English, and it only affects squadrons that are in port. In our case, the only port that we have in port is Henry Seymour. You roll a die, and I think you need a 1 or 2. We do not roll a 1 or 2. Had I rolled a 1 or 2, you could have increased Henry Seymour's squadron by 1. Okay, we'll be rolling for weather now, see if there's any change. Roll 2 dice, and we have a roll of 4, which maintains a westerly wind. So nothing changes on the wind chart there. Wind still from the west. Then I believe the next phase is the strategic movement phase. Now just prior to doing the strategic move, it says that the English player can take his squadrons that are on the tactical map and place them on top of the Armada on the strategic map. And there's a reason for doing so. So these markers that were on the bottom of the Armada are now specifically on the top, which indicates that they can move independently. Now there's a difference between the English squadrons being on top of the Armada or underneath, because the rules state that when the Armada moves, and it will move now strategically, and it must move to the next highest box, which is Beer Head. And had the English squadrons been underneath the Armada, the squadrons would have moved with the Armada. But since they were on top, they do not move with the Armada. Now the English are free to move. Why is that important? Well, because now they could either attack the Armada again from the rear, or perhaps deke into Plymouth for rearmament, repair, that kind of thing. I'll just look at the strategic situation, make a decision, and here we might fast forward the video to show you overall how the game goes. Okay, in this case I want to try a little bit of both, since I want to understand how the game works too. So what I'm going to do is I'll move the squadrons that took hits. That's Howard, Hawkins, and Drake. I'll move them back into Plymouth and let Seymour and Frobisher stay out at sea and see what they're going to do. So Frobisher and Seymour will stay at sea. Actually, that leaves just Frobisher off of Plymouth Head. Forgot that Seymour is over there in the Narrows. Now, Frobisher has no worries about the Armada attacking him, because as long as he's behind the Armada and the wind is at his back, the Armada has no way of turning around. I just have to decide whether Martin Frobisher should go in alone against the Armada. And I think in this case, I will not have him move into the Armada space. So let's take it from there, which I think the next phase is the chit pick phase. Each player will draw 2 event chits, so I'll mix them up here. We'll say the English draws one first, and he draws full sails. We can look up what that means. And he draws another one and gets one called Befouled. Okay, the Spaniard will draw his 2 chits, and he gets Priests, and his other one is No Event, and there's a little asterisk on that, so I'll just check up those rules and see what that means. Okay, nothing too surprising there. The No Event chit is put right back in the chit pile. And what you do is look up on this chart to see what the effects of those events are. We'll just take a look at them quickly, and they usually affect tactical decisions when you get into a battle. Now, what does it say for full sails? Full sails is a general event, which means Spanish or English can get it. It's an English event. It says one squadron moves one more square on any map. So the English can take advantage of that. The other one is Befouled, which says squadron may not move or attack. And he could throw that on a Spanish squadron and really mess them up. Now, Spanish have Priests, which says here, re-roll a failed morale roll. So you can use these chits at the appropriate time whenever you think they are needed. So they add a lot of dynamic elements to the game. So for the purposes of the video, I'll just put these 2 English events over here in England, and we'll put the little Priest event here in the Europe side just to remind us that the Spaniards have them. Now in the sequence of play, the next consideration would be movement on the tactical map. But since there are no enemy units on the tactical map, we can leave out that sequence. The next thing would be the Reorganize and Reinforce phase. Well, we'll look at the reorganization, and probably Francis Drake and the boys here in Plymouth can fix themselves up. Okay, as I suspected, in the repair phase, the English player will be rolling a die and consulting the repair table to see what damage is taken off from their fleets. So I'll do those rolls, and I'll show what squadrons recovered. Remember that Howard took a few hits, Hawkins some hits, and Francis Drake, and they've expended some ammunition too. Let's see what the net result of those rolls are. Okay, the result of the English repair rolls were that Howard was able to reduce his hits to 1, Hawkins reduced his hits to 2, and Francis Drake reduced his hits to 1. I'll just have to see what happens with these expended shot markers yet, because they didn't have a low ammo on them, so I'm not sure what we do here. Okay, it's pretty easy. You roll a die. 2 dice. It says dice are rolled. 4, 5, or 6. That's interesting. Okay. Rolled an 8, so he does not resupply. John Hawkins. 8, not resupply. Francis Drake, 11, no resupply. I suspect that he meant die, but let me just check the roll again. Yeah, the resupply table says 1 die. So let's try Charles Howard, and you get to add 2 if you're in a port. He rolls a 7, remove 1 low ammo marker, or 1 shot points. He's fine. We'll roll for John Hawkins. He rolls. He gets a 6, add 2, it's an 8. He gets to remove the shot marker. And Francis Drake, he's fine too. So the English squadron has fixed itself up a little bit. Might have been worth it there to go into Plymouth. Now the Armada has to try to repair itself at sea, which isn't always too nice. And so the Oquenda squadron is rolling to see if it can repair itself. And they roll a 9. And that's on which table now? Okay, you do roll 2 dice, and it's the rally table you roll on. I rolled a 5. It says +1 for every 5 hits. Well, he's got 6 hits, so he's got to at least add 1. So that's a 6. And he's actually unbroken, so he rallies. That's the end of the rally phase for both sides. Now the sequence I've just shown you continues as each space the Armada moves into and the English intercept. So you're always going from this strategic map to this tactical one, repairing if possible, and then back to the strategic. So we're not going to follow the whole game here. Special things happen when you get down here near Beachy Head and the Calais roads. So I'll just fast forward the video to as if the Spanish Armada has entered the Calais roads where the fireship attack can occur. Now I should point out that this game, though very small, is probably going to take hours to play because it's there's a lot of procedures here, but they're actually a lot of fun. Let's catch the action several turns ahead with the Spanish Armada entering the Calais roads. Okay, for the purposes of the video, we'll assume that the English have done their due diligence and attacked and bothered the Armada all the way to the Calais roads. And we'll pick up the action, we'll say, just after Francis Drake and the Seahawks have attacked the Armada, inflicted all kinds of hits and stuff like that. And when that procedure is done, you're going to get to go to this fire ships attack procedure. And I'll try to show you what happens there, and all kinds of chaos can be the result. Okay, when you do the fire ship attack procedure, there's a whole section for that, and I won't go into all the nuances of it, because to tell you the truth, I'm not 100% sure what happens. But overall, the Spanish player is going to be rolling for morale, And if you fail morale or pass, various things will happen. But overall, according to this fire ship's attack diagram, these ships on the tactical map are going to either scatter or move under their own volition on the tactical map. So one guy could be here, one guy could be here. They could be all over the place. They're trying to react to the fire ship attack. In the end, though, you're going to be taking hits and checking morale. You're kind of just managing chaos. So that's what happens when you get in the Calais Roads square, which is only 1 or 2 squares from the eventual invasion of England. So you'd have to read carefully on the fire ship attack. But like I said, it's more or less managing chaos. The English get one last shot at really messing up the Armada before the Armada rendezvous with Parma's army, which they're trying to do, pick up Parma's army and invade England. So that's it for the fire ship's attack. Okay, assuming the Armada has enough ships left to continue on, it eventually gets to Gravelines, over here, Gravelines, and that also frees up Henry Seymour's squadron. Now, when you get to the Gravelines space, there's another critical die roll for the condition of the Armada. And what you're rolling here is to make sure that the Armada is in some kind of condition to do the invasion of England. So really, all the stuff you're doing here on the strategic board, and fighting out here on the tactical board, is to lead you to these 2 tables, the condition of the Armada and the arrival of the army, which might belie the question, well, shouldn't we just roll on these 2 tables and decide the game? Well, yeah, of course you can. But the whole idea of this game is to have fun playing the game to get to this end. Now, many people would say, well, that's just not my bag. You know, rolling a table at the end of 2 or 3 hours of work and you lose the game. Well, I mean, that could happen, right? The Armada could have made all its way to the invasion site, and maybe it lands, maybe it doesn't. But the beauty of this game is in the playing of it. So it doesn't bother me in the least that in the final analysis, it comes down to the condition of the Armada and this arrival of the army. So what you've got to do as the Armada player is lessen your losses. Try to get as much of the Armada intact so that when you finally do arrive and have to roll on this table, your conditions for winning the game are enhanced. And then you go to this final table, which is the invasion. Notice it says perform after the Spanish reorganization segment. The Spanish player must perform a condition of the Armada check, but with the following results. Either pass or fail. Either win the game or you lose. And that's Invincible Armada. That's just the way it goes. Okay, concluding remarks. What do I think of Invincible Armada? Well, I think it's a brilliant little design. Not bad at all. And I certainly like it. Like I said, I've always wanted a game on the Armada, and for me, I think this is the one that will fit the bill. Sure, it's got a small footprint, it's a small game, but there's a lot more to this game than meets the eye. I think it's going to take a little while to play, though. I don't see this as being a 2-hour game or less. I think you're going to be more like 4.5, maybe 5 hours playing this thing with all the tactical decisions and die rolling. But I don't know. I think it's a fine game on the Armada. So that's my conclusions, and thank you for watching.